House Republicans, they are gearing up and ready to hit the ground running and subpoena Hunter Biden when they take control of the House in January. They vowed yesterday to dig deep into the Biden family's business dealings, and the White House is denouncing the claim in a statement that reads in part, congressional Republicans' top priority is to go after President Biden with politically motivated attacks chock full of long-debunked conspiracy theories. President Biden is not going to let these political attacks distract him from focusing on Americans' priorities, and we hope congressional Republicans will join us in tackling them instead of wasting time and resources on political revenge. But incoming House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, he's not buying that.
There's no plans to subpoena Joe Biden. There are plans to subpoena Hunter Biden.
And what does that timeline look like?
Well, I mean, you know, if I were Hunter Biden, Pam, I would want to come before my committee and prove my innocence. You know, because I said some things today that should be very concerning to Hunter Biden.
Why then would you not subpoena Joe Biden if this is all about Joe Biden?
Well, it's complicated to subpoena a president of the United States.
But it has been done with
it
several
has been
presidents.
done, and the Democrats sent out subpoenas like junk mail, and that's why it's hard to get people to come in.
You know, Emily, addressing the White House statement, James Comer and, Jim have both come out and said that they want this to be focused on the policy nexus, too, how this ties into policy decisions. And I do want to play another soundbite from James Comer here, and it's about China and liquefied natural gas and how he says that there could be a policy link between some of the business dealings. Let's see what he has to say.
At a time when Americans are suffering from high energy prices because of this administration's terrible energy policy, we find evidence that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were involved in a scheme to try to get China to buy liquefied natural gas, and from a whistleblower to try to get their foot in the door with China starting to purchase an interest in natural gas drillers. Now, people are in outrage over China buying farmland in the Dakotas. What about China starting to buy into our American energy industry at a time when we have an energy crisis because of the bad policies of the Biden administration?
So anyone who says there's no evidence of this or that, we haven't heard from the 14 whistleblowers, one of which he just mentioned.
That's right. You know, this is in every American's best interest to learn more about this, to get answers to this. And if you would supplant any name except Hunter Biden, or I should say except for the last name of Biden, then I argue the entire Democrat Party would be massively invested and interested in learning more. It is a shame to me that the mainstream media, the apologist media, has covered up essentially for the interest, the curiosity, and the potential for this conflict of interest as we're hearing these pieces of evidence that are far more than conjecture. They're actually real, that lends credence to the argument that our president, our White House, and likely this administration, and with it our security, has been compromised. We note that the president just this week said he is pledged to work with Republicans on issues of interest to the American people that they care about. Well, this is one of them. Secretary Pompeo just said this week that China is already in the gates. We know this. In fact, the Democrats have said this at large. In fact, members of the House of Congress have been actually compromised in that way. So I hope moving forward that the coverage of this is not about a hysterical left, a hysterical GOP, and that these headlines do not twist the concept of this investigation to make it all about Hunter Biden's addictions and the issues he is facing. It is far bigger than him on that level. It addresses every American's interest in security, and it is up to the GOP and to the Democrat Party to support them in pursuing these investigations as transparently and fully as possible.
And Maria, I know Democrats are saying, this is about Hunter Biden, it's going after the president's son. I've heard the arguments, but there's so much more than just Hunter Biden. There's the southern border, there's Afghanistan, there's the school board example of the letter that came out from the DOJ, there's the FBI and the false letter from 50 officials calling Hunter Russian disinformation. There is something in there I would think would be important to Democrats to look into as well.
Well, here's what's interesting. Republicans took control of the House by a very slim majority this week. And in their first press conference, they didn't talk that much about inflation. They didn't come out with a plan for their southern border. They didn't talk about how they're going to fight crime. They talked about Hunter Biden, and they tried to explain why it was bigger. When you're explaining you're losing in politics, all that complication, and they had their charts. But look, they've said they're focused on investigations, and I think the voters want them to be focused on, okay, you said you were going to fix inflation. You said you were going to fix the southern border. Where are those plans? And quite frankly, Hunter Biden, clearly has made some mistakes in his life. There is no evidence that President Joe Biden has been engaged in any wrongdoing. So if Republicans want to say to the American people, for the 2 years before this next presidential election, we are interested mostly in investigating the administration and not in actually governing, I will, as a Democrat, I will run against that every day and twice on Sundays.
The ball has moved from this is Russian disinformation to Biden never spoke about his son's business dealing to there's no wrongdoing. I mean, there is an evolution. But to quote, anytime anyone was asked about the January 6th committee, for instance, Democrats' response would be, we can walk and chew gum. We can engage in oversight, but we can also engage in policy. And I think Kevin McCarthy has already said that. He wants to make sure those 87,000 IRS agents don't come. He doesn't have the gavel yet. January, I've spoken to him. He does have plans to engage on policy. So to borrow a line from Democrats, we can walk and chew gum too.
Well, and there's 2 points here that the GOP is trying to bring out. One, influence peddling, national security risk, political cover-up. Those are on the table, right? Those are very important to know about. Democrats should want to know about that too. The second thing that's been bothering me for a long time, and I'm glad to bring it up here, is the issue of Ukraine. Because we're rooting for Ukraine so much, are we therefore going to forget the fact that then Vice President Biden withheld or said he was withholding $1 billion or said he was going to withhold $1 billion unless a federal prosecutor in Ukraine was tanked? Now, they've come out and said that had nothing to do with Hunter Biden. But here's the thing, Kayleigh. There's so many corrupt prosecutors in Ukraine, and for sure Hunter Biden was doing business in Ukraine. What was the vice president doing involved in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do want to get this in, Julie, from CNN. And look, this is just a snapshot into what the Biden administration is doing. I'm sure they focused on Hunter Biden, too. But interesting, it says that more than 4 months ago, before voters handed Republicans control of the House, top White House and Department of Homeland Security officials huddled in the Roosevelt Room to prepare for this very scenario. Sitting around the large table in the Roosevelt Room, this is the interesting part. White House lawyers probed senior DHS officials about their preparation for the wide-ranging Republican oversight that they had begun to anticipate, plans to impeach Mayorkas, et cetera. So they called DHS officials in, and I've read this in a few places. They're a little worried about the southern border investigation, it seems. They're preparing for it 4 months in advance.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that soundbite that we ran at the beginning of the segment, James Comer, the congressman, he discussed the fact that they are not subpoenaing the president of the United States. What I want to understand is why wasn't he subpoenaed during the election? Because you can't, yes, it's hard to subpoena a president, a sitting president, but we knew, and the Republicans knew and had evidence of the president's involvement in his son's dealings with Russia and China when he was running for president. So why didn't we subpoena him then? So that's what I don't understand. And it's clearly there is plenty of evidence there that shows that not only was Hunter Biden's laptop and all of that sort of, brushed under the rug, probably tucked in the same corner as Hillary Clinton's emails. But I mean, I just think at this point it's like a little too late. I guarantee you we don't get answers during this administration. And it was blocked. I mean, it was hidden. It was dusted under the rug. Well, that's what Democrats did.
Do I just have time to make a quick point, if I may, just in response to your comments, Maria? I think it's a laughable notion to argue that the Republicans have not been absolutely articulate and firm and surgical, frankly, with exactly how they would combat inflation, the rise in crime, securing the southern border. It includes repealing
they gave
bail
one
reform.
press conference and didn't talk about it,
It includes restoring judicial autonomy. It includes maintaining the southern border, restoring Title 42, and a whole host of other things. That press conference, the reason why they held it, Marie, is in part because the mainstream media has never given them the opportunity to discuss it. It is in part, as they said at that time, we'd like to stay on task and explain to you. When you mentioned explaining, it's because no one has given them even the moment, like you just didn't just then, to hear why it isn't so important to the American people, which includes security from China. So those are the things I think the GOP.
Well said. That was press conference one of many. I went down the list with incoming Majority Leader Steve Scalise. Are you investigating the border? Yep. Afghanistan? Yep. School boards? Yep. So there will be a lot more press conferences and a lot more information and whistleblowers to come.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.